You probably heard the message just now that this meeting is being recorded. That means that anything you say or anything in the camera will be shared publicly. If you'd like the things in the view not being seen, please turn your camera off, but your spoken statements will be recorded. I'd like to call the meeting to order and take the roll call. Oh, dang it. Just a second, I just, there we go. John Hymas?
Here.
John McLaughlin? We haven't seen him yet. John Brown?
Here.
Hugh Beatty?
Here.
And Frank James is here, so we have a quorum. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We have an agenda for tonight's meeting. If people had a chance to look at that, and would someone care to move acceptance or modification?
I'll move acceptance of the agenda.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is to evaluate our minutes from June 23rd. There were a few corrections made already in written form. They have not yet been incorporated into the minutes. I'll briefly review those additional things while you're looking at the minutes. Bob Carmichael sent us a note to correct 3 things that need to be slightly corrected. The first was on page 3, the first sentence of the paragraph, about 2/3 of the way down the page, which currently says a bike jump facility is in developed area of Whatcom Falls Park has resulted in increased use in less developed areas, along with off-trail use and increased damage for the Carmichael. It should have said a pump track facility was developed in Whatcom Falls Park. Second correction is that at the top of page 5, the 5th line, his comment, which said going to end as recorded, should say not going to end. And the third correction is near the middle of page 5 under new business. The second line of his comment after an Eisinger contains a typo, which should say advocated. If everybody can track those 3 corrections, I believe that we already have them in writing, Robin, and Robin can make those corrections. Are there other additions to the minutes of our meeting from June 23rd?
I believe it's the minutes as corrected. I make a motion that they be approved.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded.
Hymas, second.
Any discussion? Moved, seconded, and no further discussion. I'd call the question. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand.
Aye.
We have unanimous consent for approval of the minutes as amended with the 3 items from Mr. Carmichael. We'd like to acknowledge that our legal counsel, Bob Carmichael, is, and our secretary, Robin Albo, is here. The rest of us are listed by name, and most of you know us. We do have one guest, and I wanted to specifically appreciate too Barbara, that is illustrated here, stepping forward once again after a long involvement in this process. We're happy to see you here. Welcome.
Thank you.
We typically have a period of time where people can make a 3-minute statement if they should choose to about anything they like at the beginning of the meeting. So if you'd like, Barbara, we'd love to give you 3 minutes to say what you'd like to say. If there's an item later, we can take your time then too, if you like, but please.
Thank you. I had looked at the Parks Department proposed trails, and I'm not real familiar with all the trail system and that's there right now. And I know that there are a lot of, there's been a lot of discussion, but I had just a couple of comments about it. One is I think we should keep the emphasis on this being a forest, the Chuckanut Mountain Forest. We called it a park district from my point of view because that was our funding opportunity through the state. was a quote unquote park district. I don't believe that those of us who worked really hard to, get this in public ownership wanted to see it become a park. In that I see a park as something that loses a lot of its wilderness, its ecological value, lots of heavy use, human use. So when I was looking at the trails proposed through the Parks Department, first of all, it says, Fairhaven Park, and I would like there to be a clear delineation that that's not Fairhaven Park, that when you enter, I was thinking we could have signage that talks about this very sensitive ecological area and, something that's going to encourage most people to recognize how sensitive this area is. I don't believe 12-foot trails are really appropriate because it encourages a lot of heavy use, I would say, but it's not my field. I'm just telling you my concerns about it. What I'd like to see again is the signage when you enter, that there's a clear sense of leaving a park and entering something different, something that's unique and needs extra care. I go into Fairhaven Park a lot, and the heavy use and the bicycles off the trails and what's happening there, I would hate to see that in our forest. So that's probably my 3 minutes.
Thank you so much, Barbara. And just to reassure you, I think many of the things you said are this precise sentiments of the people on this commission pretty uniformly, and that we've expressed those same views to the city, and it is our intention to carry that out, the preservation of the forest in as much as our highest priority. I think you can say that.
I know I know all of you, some more than others, and I know that, but sometimes it helps to have some public opinion. And I can write a letter to the Parks Department and tell them this same thing.
Please do. And we very much appreciate you coming, and we hope that other people step forward and express their opinions, whatever they are, on this issue. Thank you. I also wanted to acknowledge that at 6:09, John McLaughlin dropped in from, it looks like outer space or maybe some canyon somewhere. So welcome, John. Glad to have you
Thank you.
for
Could
not just
I
a
respond to
forum, but
Barbara?
everyone being here.
Yeah, so Barbara, thank you for your comments.
We lost
Probably
you.
didn't all of them, but you don't hear me?
You were
Oh,
frozen
I
for a
see.
minute, John McLaughlin, but we didn't hear what you said, I think. You have to repeat it.
I'm getting a sign connection is unstable. I'm very mobility limited right now, so I'm from my home, not my office or outer space. So Barbara, your comments address a deep priority that I think all of us in the commission share. It's part of our mission, if not the highest priority in our mission. And yet it's a small minority expressed in all the public comments we received. Most public comments are advocating for as much access and recreational use as possible. And that's also consistent more with the mission of the Parks Department. But as you said, we are dealing with a very different place with very different values. And so while the commission is going to advocate those values, it's really helpful for the Parks Department to hear that from the public as well.
Okay.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
Right.
I'll work on getting some more people to comment.
Good.
Thank you for that too.
Like Ed Grumby Ed Grumby was along the same lines. It was great reading his comments.
Yeah, he's written some comments very similar, and we've had similar discussions.
That's Ed Grumbine, and he is a grandfather of conservation. So he speaks from a deep well of knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah. I just want to tell you one real quick anecdote. I have a 10-year-old grandson, and he is fascinated with and knows a lot about trees, native trees, forests, and he loves to go to the ridge and just despairs if he sees anything that's been damaged. You know, he just, and or if there's ever, if he spies any invasives, he gets quite distressed about that too. So it's, you know, he really recognizes the importance of the forest.
Barbara, one encouraging thing you might take to him is we did have the invasive species expert here a couple of meetings ago, and her conclusion was that the forest is largely free of invasive species. She outlined in all the places there were invasive species, including a pretty good sized patch of bamboo. But it is, as she said, the forest itself is largely a very pristine and not impacted by invasive species. And the ones that we have, she believed would be relatively easy to ferret out and get rid of. So some good news for him.
Yes, thanks.
Although I'm glad he's disturbed by it. I am too.
Frank, could I add something to that
Sure.
is of general interest to us? I think you're right. My observations are very similar about distribution of invasive species, but we are dealing with a relatively recent expansion of compacted soils and disturbed areas.
Yeah.
And so it's only a matter of time before the invasive species that make use of those kinds of conditions really take off. And so it's imperative upon us to both get the master plan in place and to include restoration as a component so we can restore conditions for the native species and not provide the habitat that invasive species make use of.
Yeah.
So basically, we have very limited window of time to prevent that problem from getting much worse.
Thanks, John, and thank you, Barbara. The next thing on our agenda is the Parks Advisory Board meeting report. John Hymas, I know you're struggling with getting them in a timely way, but is that something that's happened?
Well, I reached out to Joan Blethyn because I'm being ignored. And I look forward to in-person meetings for the Park and Rec Board, even though they're at 7 a.m. on a Wednesday. So I don't know what to say. I can't get anything out of, I can't get responses when I ask for like minutes. And so I'm hoping John shows up later tonight, because I asked him, I said, John, it's not working for me, and you're on the Park and Rec Board. Maybe you can forward these minutes to us. So I don't know. Sorry.
No worries, John. Thank you. And when you do get them, if you'd forward them to Robin, I would appreciate it so we can get them distributed. Thank you. Robin, you had your
I
hand
will.
up. Is there something?
Hugh wanted to say something.
Thank you.
Oh, I just on a friend, or I don't know who it was, actually put up a picture of a turtle today out that they took out at Lake Haddon in the sand, digging and laying eggs.
Wow.
And I thought, this is great, you know, and someday we'll have turtles down our way too, I bet, you know.
Can you share that picture? I'd like to know what kind it is.
I have to find it again. It was on a Facebook post, a wildlife post, some little wildlife sighting club or whatever.
Yeah, if you could just post it on our page or give us into Robin so we can post it, it'd be great. Thank you. Encouraging signs are always welcome. Our old business is rescheduling the Annalise Burns presentation. And Robin, do you have an update on what the opportunities or possibilities might be?
So I sent an email to Annalise and Nicole And I basically gave them 3 options to see if any of those would work with them. Annalise was fine with them. I didn't hear from Nicole, so I have no idea what her preference was. But I mentioned the thing about inviting all 5 board members to a steering committee with the caveat from Bob that to ensure compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, that it be scheduled as a special public meeting of the board and that the topics be limited to a published agenda. That was the first option. The second option was one that Annalise has suggested, which is the board on their own can just view the presentation to the city council on August 30th live or after the fact from the City of Bellingham webpage. And I can send that link to everyone. And then we could have a question and answer time with either Annalise or Nicole at either the September or October meetings. Annalise cannot be at the September meeting, and I don't know if Nicole can. But that's the other option. And then the third option is we could schedule her to talk in October, November, or we can set up a special meeting of the board that is not at the steering committee. So those are our 3 options. And
Barbara,
there
just
may
to-
be more if you guys have any ideas, but
Barbara, the relevance of this, just for your information, sorry, it's a little cryptic, is that she has developed a plan for urban forests in the city that's meant to be comprehensive for the entire city, which would, of course, substantially impact what we hope to preserve in the Chuckanut Community Forest. And so we were quite anxious to find out what that plan entailed, but have not been able to get access to it. It'll be presented to the city council on the 30th of August. And of course, we can attend as citizens on that, or we can view the document. But it's a high priority for us to find out what those data points are and what that information is and what the strategic plan might be for the city and how it might interface with what the conservation that we hold on this property going forward. So that's the relevance of it. That might not have been clear from just this cursory comments. So what's the pleasure of the board in terms of addressing this issue? Is there a strategy or approach that would be preferred or actions that we can or should take? Yes, Mr. Hymas.
So are the city council meetings still virtual?
Yeah,
I believe they are.
Oh,
they are.
well,
Just parenthetically, the whole COVID thing is going the wrong way. Right
Yeah.
now, the number of cases right now are far in excess of the first wave and about the same as the second and fourth waves. Not as big as the third, fortunately. But there's a very substantial increase in cases right now, largely because people that are unvaccinated are coming into public spaces unmasked, and that's leading to a very rapid and brisk spread of the virus. I had hoped we would be back to in-person meetings. I think the chance of that is slim to none for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Development and spread of the Delta variant.
Well, in that case, then I would suggest that we invite Annalise in October and check out what goes down at city council in August.
It does sound like there is going to be a presentation of some data points and perhaps an overview of it at our planning meeting with the city as well that we participate in. I don't know if we'll be free to talk about that after the meeting. Typically, how does that work, Mr. Carmichael?
As long as there's not more than 2.
Presents information at our joint meeting, or not our joint meeting, but our meeting with them about planning for this particular forest, are we at liberty, or is that something that's held, kind of done on a case-by-case basis, or what are the restrictions on sharing that information?
is that the steering committee, Frank, that you're
Yeah, the
talking
steering
about?
committee, I believe that what that language that we saw was that they would be sharing elements of that as it's relevant to Chuckanut Community Forest at the meetings.
So this is the steering committee for what?
Oh, the steering committee for the master planning process, John.
Okay, all right.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the question, Frank. It was, what are the obligations on sharing information?
Yeah, I believe that these steering committees are open public meetings like many other things, and people could attend. So I assume any presented information there is public information. Is that correct? Or is there some special?
Yeah. I would say because it's a city process, the city attorney is going to have to weigh in on that. It's not as clear because it doesn't include elected officials, voting members. It's not necessarily an open public meeting, the steering committee. But I would not rule it out. I know that there was in the county a long process studying water resource issues called the planning unit. It still exists. There weren't elected officials at those meetings either. They were a number of different entities that would come in and they some of them were public entities, but they were staff members that would come. And the county attorney those meetings were open public meetings. There was a question about that. So I don't think I can really answer that question. I think that's a question for the city attorney.
Well, when we have the meeting, we can ask Nicole if how much of the information presented can be shared. It seems, I'm not exactly sure why it's so confidential, except that it hasn't been presented to the county council yet. I assume it's just a courtesy confidential. I can't foresee any other reason it would be to city council. It is, of course, draft until it's accepted, but I think that's understood by everyone. We'll inquire at the meeting to see what their preference is.
A separate question is whether records that are part of that meeting are public records available on request, subject to the Public Records Act. And that would be a question to ask as well. Of course, the city does have a public records officer. Anyone can make a request for records and then they would review whether they were documents that they had to release or not.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So Frank,
Yes.
two things. First, I would strongly endorse Bob's comments about our participation meeting. If we avoid having our own public meeting there by not interacting, I think that would defeat much of the value of our presence. And so I would strongly urge us to follow his guidance in his email message. And second, regarding future or near-term meeting public in person versus not in person or virtual, you know more than any of us, at least, and certainly more current information than any of us. But I was in the emergency room 2 nights ago, and it was full of people exhibiting severe symptoms, all the severe symptoms of COVID. They were young folks, and it was, I think, a glimpse to come.
I can share with you that in the past 2 weeks, all of our cases in San Juan County have been in people that were immunized because we have very high immunization rate, but they're all, it's not, it is, people don't get hospitalized and they don't die, but they certainly get infected with a Delta particle, even though they're immunized.
Yeah.
So I think I don't see a path forward that's going to get us back into public meetings very, very quickly.
Right.
Certainly not in the short term. So what's the pleasure of the group then? Should we simply invite Annalise to our October meeting and ask for a presentation at that point? We all obviously are free to attend the city council meeting. I would encourage each of you to do that. This is something very germane to what we're doing. But what's the pleasure of the committee?
Later to the October meeting. I think John Hymas's idea is a good one.
Great.
Do we want to, we also want to act as fairly quickly about this, and that's 3 months away.
Yeah.
You're aware of that, John Hymas. Is there any, but we cannot get her before us. We can't get her before us before October.
Unless we do a special meeting on our own just for that. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's possible, right, Bob?
Yes, that's possible, certainly.
Is there any downside to waiting until October?
I don't think so. I mean, all she's going to do is talk about the tree canopy plan. You know?
Well, I think there may be a substantial downside to it in that the planning for the kind of the master planning document is going to be going forward, and presumably will be informed by that plan and its intentions by the city. It seems like it would be essential to have access to those elements that would impact conservation and preservation and restoration of a forest as the highest priority. So I personally find it very troubling that we wouldn't have access to what the documents.
Is there any chance that Annalise could meet with Nicole in any part of the Parks Department? Would that be to our advantage?
I don't know what you mean, John.
I mean, can she meet with them and discuss the kinds of things that we feel are of concern to this particular property?
I presume she meets with them all the time, and I would be surprised if she hadn't had that discussion. This is the largest forest that the city has.
Right.
Well, close to one of the larger forests that the city has, I'm sure.
Okay.
I
Quite a bit
think
of land up that is a forest. Up at Paddock.
I think that the plan was to present to the steering committee. It seems like she could present to the steering committee without inviting the other board members. So at least some of you could talk to her, but I don't know if that's really what you want. So, but I just thought I'd bring that up.
That's a good idea. I like the idea of talking to her directly. I and Frank and Vincent Bachunas. Then we could relay her thoughts to the city, or if that's the way you see it going, Frank.
Well, I think both in our planning process for the both formally for the long-term master planning process, but also for any possible renegotiation of our agreements with the city, it would seem to be quite germane to those discussions.
What do you want, Frank? I mean, what would you like to see? What's your preference here?
Well, it's puzzling to me since it is important, critically important to our future as an entity, the Chuckanut Community Forest. I don't understand the lack of the unwillingness to share those elements of it that are relevant to what we're doing with us at this point. I mean, we're a duly elected representatives that have significant responsibilities for one of the largest forests that it would impact. I just don't know why they would not be more forthcoming in sharing that information with us.
You're talking about the city.
I'm talking about the Parks Department.
Yes, the Parks Department. Okay.
Just my sense from the emails I've exchanged with Annalise is not an unwillingness. I mean, I don't know what the delay keeps being, but there's not an unwillingness to share the information with us. My understanding is that she, for whatever legal reasons, possibly, I don't know, she has to present to the city council before she can share it with anybody else. At least that's what she said to me. So.
Well, yeah, draft documents that aren't city policy aren't approved by either the mayor and the administrative infrastructure or the city council. And I don't know, Bob, do you know the actual status of this particular instrument? Is it approved by the city council, or does it have a legal status that would require it to be kept private at this point?
I don't know, but I will say this much, that if it is a document that could become a policy of the city or contains city policy in it, as a draft, it would be exempt from the Public Records Act, at least the portions of it that contained draft policy. Portions of the report that were factual in nature are not protected by the Public Records Act, even in draft form, and would have to be released. Now, has the city violated the Public Records Act before? Yes. And would they release these with proper redactions if we requested them? I don't know the answer to that. But I can tell you the proper, the legal, let's just assume they are policy that has to be adopted by the city. The correct answer is, if we requested it, they would have to give us a redacted version of the report, one that struck out the references to policy and kept the sections on fact. And of course, that wouldn't maybe provide exactly what we wanted, because we wouldn't have those policy statements. But I do think they could keep the policy portion of it from us because it's in draft form.
And they'll present it on August 30th, right? And once it's presented to city council, I presume it's a public document at that point, or is there?
Yes. Once it's presented to the city council, the whole thing would become public.
Yeah. So it seems to be respectful. We would probably, well, obviously we don't want the policy piece, because that's really the city council's work to do, not ours, even though it does interrelate with what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And presumably the progress on our long-term planning document, our master plan, given that it's a forest that it applies to, would be obviously need to be informed by those policy decisions, right? I mean, so it seems like making progress on our long-term planning is going to be pretty hard until we know really what those policies are.
Well, I don't know that I'd say we can't make progress. I don't think the process can be completed, perhaps, but I still think there's a lot of things that could be done that don't require knowing what the city's final policy on urban forests would be.
Can we bring up a lot of these considerations, Frank, just in an open way with Nicole and Lonnie Lane, or whatever her name is, Potter on Friday? We
Sure.
already have some things to talk about with her.
I think we
Put
definitely.
them to the wall and say, we want this stuff. You express, these are our concerns, and we're a little worried, and we would like these kinds of findings by Annalise to, we need them for our plan.
Yeah, well, presumably she's going to present much of that information at the meeting that's coming up and in subsequent meetings. And hopefully we'll be free to share that in a public way with not only our fellow commissioners, but with the public in general.
Sure.
And a draft, as a person that works in government, I understand the importance of draft things not being perceived as final policy. Drafts are drafts. But we can certainly move that forward. So our plan then would be, what I heard expressed was an interest in inviting her to October meeting. Is that the consensus of the group?
If that's the earliest we can have her, then yeah.
The option would be to invite her to some meeting after the August 30th meeting and before October meeting, which is, that is the month of September. But did you say she was gone during September sometime, Robin?
Yes, she is gone from, let's see here. Just takes me a sec to look it up here. I think it was just before, September 20th to October 8th is when she'll be gone.
So clearly, so then the first 3 weeks in September, she might be available to meet with us.
Yeah,
So I guess the two options that I see are inviting her to the October meeting, or having a special meeting, or having an opportunity to meet with her sometime in the month of the first 3 weeks of September. Again, what's the pleasure of the commissioners?
Would you prefer, Frank, that just the steering committee meet with her sometime in early September before she goes?
Well, the steering committee, well, if you like, I think the whole board is going to want to know what the plan is, though. It's broad in scope, should encompass, we incorporate much of what we're doing. So I don't think it's this. I don't think it's the steering committee members that need to hear it. I think we'll hear a good deal of it, hopefully, on Friday, and
Sure.
we'll be able to share what the city's planning is with both our commissioners. I would hope. So I don't think we want to meet with just with the. I think it would be better to have her do a public presentation to a meeting that is both all of our commissioners and the public.
Then you're really talking about a special meeting around the middle towards the end of September.
If we, well, in the first three, I mean, she would be free to do this, I presume, if the city council presentation is on the 30th, from what Nicole has said. Once that happens, then it's public information and she would be free to come and talk with us about it. So it'd actually be, John, the first 3 weeks of September or towards the end of October, which is when our next routine meeting would be. So we either have.
You want it, but you want this whole thing before October, and I can understand that. You've made a good case for that. It seems to me that we're kind of in a bind here. We're if we want to hear this lady and want to be informed and our master plan thoughts and concepts and approvals and ideas informed by what she has to say, we need to get that information to interact with her as soon as possible. And if September, if we have to do it in a special meeting in September, frankly, I don't want to do that. But well, if it's in the interests of what we're doing, then of course we have to do it. If you feel that it's really in the interests, and if the board feels it's in the interests, John McLaughlin and you, then we should do it.
What do other people think?
Do you think the council is going to adopt this plan after their August meeting right away, or are they going to put it off for another meeting? So we might not have a real plan. We just have a presentation, really.
Bob, do you have a sense of that? Is this, I mean, typically if something is accepted as policy, there would be both an introductory meeting and then a vote at a later time. Is that, but I don't know if this is going to be adopted as policy per se, is it? Or?
Yeah, so first of all, I think Hugh makes a really good point. It's very, it's a big unknown whether the council will actually adopt something on the same day that it's presented to it.
Wouldn't that be unusual for them to do that?
It depends on how much, if it's the very first time they've seen it, then it would be unusual for them to adopt it that same night, I would say. Probably not unprecedented, but unusual. However, once it is presented in public, I believe the document should be available then to the public. And that's going to be the question. I don't know if the city attorney is going to agree with me, but that's my opinion, that if it's presented in public, it should be available to the public under the Public Records Act. So we just.
What it said was the reason not to present to us was simply the formality of presenting it to the council first, because it's their document.
Yeah, I think I understand why they don't want to release it now until they present it. But once they presented it, even if it hasn't been adopted yet, it should be available to the public at least. You may not have adopted policy, but hopefully you'd at least have access to the draft.
So the options as I see them is, again, asking when in that first 3 weeks of September she could meet with us and do a presentation to both us and the public, or to have her come to the October meeting a month or so later, more than a month later, to do the same presentation then. What do people prefer?
What do you want, Frank?
Well, I'm like you, John. I'm not anxious about having a meeting in September, but I think that a special meeting in September, but I think that that's what we should do myself. But I
agree with Frank. I think that's what we should do.
So you can make a motion. I can't make it or second it, but if
I
that's.
make a motion that we have a special meeting, call for a special meeting, inviting the public to hear a presentation from Annalise in some specified date in the first 2 weeks of September. And
I'll
give the
second
public-
that.
Well, John, just as a friendly amendment, I would say anytime between August 30th and September 20th, I think are the actual dates that she would be available.
That's my motion. Yep.
Second,
You
Could
second
I
it?
make a request? I'll be away the first 2 weeks of September, so if we could have it in the third week. that'd be-
So what,
So we can express that preference and just ask about her availability.
what day will you be back, John?
I think probably about the 15th, 14th.
So if we could express a preference between the 14th and 20th of September, and unable to do that, John, I'm sorry if she can't do that. We'll probably schedule it between.
Just a preference.
John Hymas?
Mike, John.
You need to unmute, John. There you
There.
go.
I'm kind of in favor of the steering committee advising us on what they know and just go from there. Special meeting is a lot of work to set up and stuff, but anyway, that's my preference. Just I trust the steering committee, and why can't you just pass on what you learn from us to us?
Oh, I think, John, we of course will do that. I think if we're allowed to do that, I think the question is the other half of it. So I think what we're allowed to share, we will obviously share with the committee of everybody on all the commissioners. So John and I will be there. We'll find out what we find out, and then we may or may not be given permission to share that with the rest of the group.
What? Really? Huh.
We will be given permission. We'll insist on it. You'll be the first to know, John.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, that's my opinion. Whatever y'all think. Well,
I think both John and I would be more than anxious to share what we learn with you if we're allowed to. Yeah, for sure. Should we leave it then that if we feel like we have a thorough understanding of the impacts on the Chuckanut Community Forest of the city's new forest management plan, that if we when we can share that with everybody, then we wouldn't need to do that special meeting. That makes sense. And then shall we tentatively have a special meeting set up in case that's not the case, or shall we? We don't want to have a special meeting to call a special meeting, right?
right.
I think that's very good, Frank. Let's have a tentative meeting, and Robin can check with Annalise and find out if she's free to attend a possible special meeting on the dates when our lovely friend Dr. McLaughlin happens to be around.
The 14th to the 20th of September.
Yeah, whenever is convenient, whenever his busy schedule permits.
And then if she's not available, then sometime between the 30th of August and the 20th and the 14th of September.
Right.
Great. I think we've got a clear motion at this point, and I think I heard this is discussion of a motion and a second as modified. So yes, Robin.
Can you just restate it so I make sure I have everything? Because there was a lot of stuff in there.
I'm not even sure we need a motion to do it, actually, but it's
For a special meeting, you
we
might.
need to invite.
Yeah, I can answer that. I think this is going to be hard to come up with a motion and might take longer than it's worth. If we have enough information, I think, on the parameters of it, the chair has the authority to schedule a special meeting unilaterally So that's what I would suggest, that if, based on the input that you have had, you've given him, that he would, I'm sure he would take that into account and schedule the special meeting at a time when everyone said they would like to have it scheduled. And so if you leave the chair that discretion, as long as he gives all of you sufficient notice, it's either 24 hours or 48 hours. I can't remember which, but he's got to give that much notice. I would suggest more than that so that the public is aware and has time to attend. But so he can give as much notice as he can, but it doesn't require a vote.
Thanks for
Okay.
the reminder, Bob. We'll do that. Sound okay? So, Master Planning Steering Committee meetings and consultants is the next item on our agenda. John Brown, did you want to summarize where we're at, or would you like me to do that, or?
I'll give a very brief summary. I called Lane Potter today. We are going to have a meeting on Friday morning at 8 o'clock. It will last for 2 hours. It's a Zoom meeting. Nicole Nicole and Lane, who is sort of heading up our portion of the master plan. They have hired a consultant, the city, to coordinate meetings, just to facilitate together. She and Nicole have worked on the initial data of a forest management plan. They are gathering that data. It also has to do with urban interface. That was one of the phrases she used. On Friday, they will give us an update on the data and an analysis, so far as it goes, of a public survey done in the month of August. Those are 2 items on the agenda for Friday morning as our steering committee meets with the Parks Department for the 3rd time. That's all I have to say, John Hymas. Frank, you're muted.
Okay, well, I'll go back to turtles for a minute. I found the turtle. It's up on I put it up on my Facebook page as a share. And the woman is Ann Stevenson. And she said, "Who knows about turtles at Lake Padden? Michael and I were walking today and found this turtle laying marble-sized oval eggs near the swimming beach. Not a terribly safe spot." And there's 48 different comments on it. So you can read all about it if you want to look it up. And there's a picture of the turtle. Some say it's a Western pond turtle. Some say it's not.
Breaking news in our meeting.
Yeah.
I guess I had one comment that I wanted to bring forward and a suggestion. I feel that this progress is being made with the city, but I think it's also being very much directed pretty much unilaterally by the city. And I think that what we're going to get are things to decide on rather than active participation in the process in defining the scope and of the overall process. And I have a relatively radical proposal to make to you. And that is that I think we should hire our own consultant to help us scope and assist us in implementing our goals and objectives in having a master plan. I don't think the city is going to involve us in a way that will give us the co-equal status that I think our many millions of dollars and substantial sweat equity in this process would warrant. So what I would like to propose tonight is that we in fact hire our own consultant to guide the process specifically with respect to conservation and preservation of the biological and other resources for preservation of this parcel, which is our main mission in this process. I think there are consultants out there. Clearly, they have not chosen. I don't even know who they've chosen, but it is not. I checked with a couple of people and couldn't find out. And I know that it's not the people that we have typically relied on in the past for advice about this. So we certainly have the budgetary, also have to hire a staff person for that purpose. But that's and we don't necessarily take this up tonight, but I believe that at least as I participate in this process so far, that our interest in preservation and conservation and restoration would be very well served by securing someone to manage the information and process for us and not simply relying on John and I's ability to attend these meetings. And I just like to float that as an idea for comment on from the commissioners. I might ask first, Bob, your opinion. Are my assumptions that we have the fiscal and legal authority to do this? Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
What do people think?
Frank, I think that's both wise and very strategic. I am concerned, first of all, the consultant city's hiring, it sounds like is someone to manage the public process. That's very different from what you're describing in terms of designing the master plan and point. But regarding our interests, I'm concerned that when you can still hear me?
Mhm.
Yes.
When the city does get going, it may end up making decisions fairly quickly without the level of thought and experience with this kind of place that we have been emphasizing. And so the process and doing our homework with someone who both understands the protection we're after and understands the planning process, I think would be very strategic. We've already mentioned a couple of the names that would be obvious candidates for that who have done that kind of thing elsewhere and done it very well and have a lot of experience. Those are Ken Wilcox and secondarily Jerry Wilbur. And Jerry Wilbur deferred to Ken, said he would be the best person. The third name I would suggest might be Ann Isinger. We all know who she is.
We can certainly throw it open to people that apply. We may get some outstanding applicants. And I think we should be open to anybody that was interested. But I agree, those are the kinds of people that we would want, again, with an eye towards conservation, preservation, and restoration of the parcel.
But those are also people who have worked with trail plans and areas both and for biodiversity protection, the implications or the consequences of rooting a trail in a particular location, what that's going to do to the rest of the area. And so I'm afraid that's the kind of insight that might be lacking from the city's process, or depending upon which consultant they get. And so if we can select that kind of person and ensure that kind of input thought goes into the master planning process, I think we're better off rather than trying to react to whatever city comes up with.
Right.
I agree entirely, John, that those are great examples of the kinds of people we want. We wouldn't want to have the appearance of pre-selecting anyone, though. So I think we would want to be open to any applicant who wanted to apply.
There are
criteria of being able to champion conservation, preservation, and restoration as part of this process.
No, I only mention those because they are very qualified people with local knowledge. They're out there. We can find someone like that.
Other commissioners' thoughts about the possibility of doing this?
What if,
Go ahead.
You?
what if one of those three people that we've just discussed happens to get hired by the city to be their consultant? Then what do we do?
That isn't going to happen to you.
It depends on,
then we have them and another good person working on the issues.
Yeah.
Each of those people has an area of expertise. Jerry knows everything there is to know about making trails. Not such a broad picture in terms of conservation and preservation.
Is
He
this
has
going to,
strengths. But we might be able to complement the person the city hires, whoever they are, with someone with that broader focus on conservation, restoration, and preservation.
sure.
So,
Yes.
Well, then I have to, how long and how much do you think?
It's
I
going to be
think-
$25,000 to $50,000, Hugh. Say, just for example, what if it is?
Well, I thought the city said they were going to spend 25, right?
Well, they were going to spend
Oh.
on the whole process. And I think what we heard from the people that spoke up from the public was that it might be more, that a real plan that embraced the things we're talking about, conservation, preservation, and restoration, might be more on the order of $100,000.
Yeah.
That's what was said at our meeting. I don't know what we need to pony up for that. I expect it's somewhere between those two numbers.
Yeah.
We
Well,
could
and,
do it-
and Eisinger did the baseline study for around $12,000.
right.
yeah,
So we can do it two ways. We can do an RFQ or an RFP. We could decide what the work is and ask for somebody to do that work and see how much they charge and pick the best person for it. Or we could say, here's an amount of money, do the work they would make a proposal based on the amount, how much work they would do towards that goal. There are RFQs and RFPs. Is that the right approach, do you think, Bob? One or the other of those, do they make more sense? From a legal
If you have a good idea of, one of the things you might want to do is do an RFP, because if you think there's interest, an RFP would give you some ideas from the professionals of what they might bring to the process. If you want to keep it very simple, you could do an RFQ.
I think RFQs are really, if we know what we want in pretty detail, then it works pretty well. I think RFP might be the best tool for this. A request for proposal, basically say conservation, preservation, restoration for this parcel, long-term plan, openness to manage this process, and then see what people propose.
Yeah. I think if we're going to do that there will need to be that should be done pretty quickly, because decision should be made now, because it's going to take some time to put that out and give people time to respond to it. You put a deadline, and then the board would have to meet and decide which proposal it wanted. It might want to interview people. So there's a process involved. Now, you can do it quicker, but I would think it's probably going to take 2 months anyway. Would be a pretty quick process. So keep that in mind.
Let's see, John Hymas, you had something to say and you didn't get a chance to say it. Would you?
I like what Bob just said, and I think we should go for it. I don't really think it would cost us as much as the city's planning on spending. I wouldn't think. I mean, these people are the three that were listed are kind of have what is the word? Anyway, they have skin in the game. They want to save it and preserve it like we do. So anyway, no, I think we should get on that right away, because that might coincide with the start of serious master planning. because what I see, the way the city master plans other parks are, they hire, they rent a space near the park and invite all the neighbors, and they discuss it. And they have, their people, describe what they think. And if we have ours, there you go. I think, it might work out.
Other comments?
I guess I'm gonna have to weigh on this
Oh,
eventually.
sure, John, please do.
Um, I feel like putting in my heels on this. I will go with the experienced scientists. And we know that Frank and John McLaughlin are applied scientists, and I'm in the final analysis, I will back them. But I do not like a bit the notion of letting go forth the idea of the city acting unilaterally, or the city not involving us in a co-equal way.
Mhm.
I've been with this thing for upwards of 10 years, and that has not been my experience with James King or Leslie Bryson or with Nicole Oliver. These old people have all been very cooperative in what we're trying to do. So I don't like the idea of moving into a sort of adversarial position respecting the city. On the other hand, we do want, as John McLaughlin says, to be part owners, at least. If we don't own the process, at least we are part owners of it. So we're going to find out things as we meet with Nicole on Friday, and as we meet with the Parks Department in the future, as the steering committee meets with them. We're going to find out how cooperative they are in the details, the kinds of things that we've been talking about so far. Releasing information and timelines and arranging meetings and putting just how cooperative they are. So far, I like what they're doing, and I think that they as public officials need to be encouraged, and that they have encouraged us. Nicole made it clear the last time we had a meeting that we had a very important role to play in this process, that we were the main ones in the process. She and Wendy Scherer pointed that out, that she felt that Nicole was making that point. So in general, I like the idea, but I don't like the idea of complicating, so to speak, complicating the process. None of us like the idea of complicating the process. It slows it down. If it's moving in a positive direction fast, and if it can be massaged in a way to move in a positive direction fast, then I don't like to tamper with it. But certainly getting a person like Ken Wilcox or Jerry Wilbur or somebody else that we can think of, that might, for $10,000, we might get a real bang for the buck. I don't know how I think about it yet. I kind of want to see it play out a little more before we actually send out a help wanted ad.
On the reason that I had paused by the process so far is that I looked carefully at our current agreements with the city, and they were negotiated much to our disadvantage. I don't know if you've read them recently, but what it says in both the conservation easement and our direct agreement with the city, except from that, neither one really embodies conservation, preservation, and restoration in the way that I believe we have come to view this. I don't want to end up with a long-term planning document that doesn't include these things in a major way.
I side with you there.
Yeah. I mean,
I want to say one more thing. You have mentioned this difference between regarding it, and Barbara has pointed it out very eloquently, and so has John McLaughlin pointed it out, the difference between a forest and a park. We can go on and on about this, how we see it and how we feel about it. And after we went on and on about it for upwards of half an hour, 2 meetings ago, after we did this, had something like this discussion, wonderful Bob Carmichael began to talk, and within about 4 minutes, he referred to this property as a park at least 4 times. It's just natural for us to speak of it. This doesn't mean he's a stupid guy. He gets the distinction as much as we do. But it's natural for people. Do we want to get balled up, kind of stuck on semantics here?
I don't think it's semantics, John.
Oh, I don't think it's semantics either, Frank. I get the
very
point.
important
But
difference.
do we want to dwell on this?
I, all I'm advocating for is that conservation, preservation, and restoration are the core of what our mission is. And if that gets lost in the process, and it could be, the process the city has outlined is getting all the neighbors together to say, what do they want to do on the land? Where's the voice for the animals that live there? Where's the voice for the plants that live there? Where's the voice for restoration? I saw
Us.
no effort at restoration being talked about. The direction I feel is going in is exactly the opposite direction of what we need to do. And we, I think, honestly, desperately need help of professionals that know and understand and how to achieve those goals that we hold incredibly dearly. I mean, if we were to preserve this property, but not have conservation, not preservation of the species that are there, not restore the land to its natural capacity, its optimal capacity, that would be devastating. That would be, I think we would be abrogating the responsibility we took on.
Oh yeah, sure we could, Frank. We could go on and on and on. I believe in what you say. I believe in what you say.
Then we
Is
need
it
to act on
is
it,
it
John.
is it going to is the process moving slowly, evolving slowly in a direction that will encompass the kinds of things that you're talking about? Will the process involve that as it's going right now? I think it's possible that a consultant would help it very much. I think your idea is a very good one, Frank.
But it's not to fight with the city, it's to augment what they're doing with a perspective that is the core of our mission.
If you can sell that, I back it. I back it.
We have to change historic park policy. Parks in the city are for recreation. We have to change that for our site. And I don't know about any others, but it's like, no, this isn't necessarily for heavy duty recreation. This is for preservation and conservation, and it's an ecological jewel that needs to be taken care of. And so it's going to be different from city parks. And I don't know if we need to hire somebody right away or not, but if we have enough people preaching that at the neighborhood meetings and part of the master planning process, then maybe, we'll succeed. Otherwise, I don't, would a consultant change people's minds?
Might.
Because it's basically going to come down to a vote at a lot of these meetings. They're going to take public input. Whoever says the most, it's probably going to get their way. I don't know.
But the vote is going to be a choice among different ideas. And if our ideas aren't on the table, or if a well-thought plan isn't on the table, it doesn't even get the opportunity to get a vote. Let me say 3 things. First, what we're talking about in terms of protection also supports recreation. It's not the intensive kind of recreation that you can get at other parks, but it is a special kind of recreation for people who want to go and experience an acoustically natural environment, or who want to bump into a pileated woodpecker, or something else that you don't get in more developed parks. And I would suggest that in my efforts to develop projects for I've asked the city, what would you like to see in a restoration plan? And they didn't have an answer for me. They hadn't thought about it. To be fair, I don't think they were allowed to, because they didn't have funding for it. They weren't allowed to work on this yet. But they hadn't given the things we've been talking about really any thought. And so I'm concerned about how much thought that will be given as this process goes further. And my third thing is we've had now 3 hearings, and we put together many plans and ideas and just provided them to the city free of charge. And I don't think that has been perceived, and it certainly hasn't been offered as competition. It's our attempt to improve the process. And I think if we work with a consultant, that can be done in the same light. You know, we are deeply invested and concerned about this place, invested both in our time and in all the money that the residents of the Park District have provided. And we want to ensure that the values that they have invested in and that we represent are reflected in the master plan. And so we are stepping up again, even further, to ensure that by hiring a professional consultant. It's no longer students, but we would be actually paying a consultant. I think this can both improve the outcome, and it can be framed in a way that's not perceived as antagonistic.
As Frank says, he wants it to augment the process. Frank, would you be willing tomorrow on Friday morning or do you think that it is politic, that it's intelligent for you to run, or for one of us to run, you'd be the best one, to run by the city our thoughts? We have been thinking about hiring a consultant to help you along and to help us along.
I'd be happy to inform them about it. I don't think we need their permission. I mean,
No.
I think
No.
it's a responsibility we have to the people that elected us and to the people that paid for the conservation easement that we hold. One of my fears is that there's a lot of inertia in the city to do things the way they've done it before. For example, we specifically asked about putting a placeholder name as the Chuckanut Community Forest on this parcel of land. And we were told very specifically that is not allowed prior to the completion of that'll happen as part of the master planning process. However, if you look at any city map of this parcel, it is labeled as Fairhaven Park.
Nicole has explained that 10 times, and Bob
I don't
Carmichael
care.
has explained
What
it.
I'm telling you is the impetus, the inertia that goes on is unstoppable. I mean, all the
Okay.
city maps have that name on them already, and many other people, like books or trail guides, biking guides, use that name now. And I find that extremely unfortunate because it doesn't follow the process that the people that laid out the process intended.
It
Whether
doesn't
it's-
follow the city's own process, but you know, okay. Frank, what do you think, by the way? I like the idea of moving ahead. Do we really want to go ahead specifically right now at this time in time with putting together qualifications for a consultant, or is this something the hiring of a consultant, do we want to assemble the paperwork on that for the next meeting?
I personally think we're behind already. And
Right.
if Bob's prediction of 2 months is accurate, I think we're very far behind already. I don't
You
think
want this thing to go into the Herald within a week?
Yeah, ideally,
Okay.
I
Okay.
do. I'd be happy to work on it, along with any of you that would like to join in, if we decide to do this.
Well, I'm in favor.
How about you, Imus?
You need a motion?
Yes,
We
I
need
think
a
we should have a
forest
motion on
park
it.
rather than a forest park.
So as a chair, I can't really make a motion, so I'd entertain John McLaughlin. You seem to be an advocate for this. Would you try to formulate a motion?
Sure. I move that we proceed with an RFP for hiring a consultant to develop a protection, conservation, and restoration plan for the Chuckanut Community Forest to be incorporated in the park master plan.
I second that.
Sounds good.
With a budget of X dollars.
In the budget of,
We could tweak the city's beak a little bit by saying 30,000.
Well,
Mhm.
we need to put in,
So that we really want to help. We really want to make a significant contribution to this process. And not to tweak their beak. I was just joking. I think if we made it something like that, I think it would show that we are committed to these goals of conservation, preservation, and restoration, and ensuring that they're included in the process.
Right, but Frank, if you consider the master planning process, the city has developed its budget for, it's much broader in scope than what we're talking about. I mean, they're dealing with, okay, are you having restroom facilities? What kind of parking facilities you have? All the signage and communication and public input and, you know, the whole 9 yards. We're talking
But
about
they're
a much,
also expending, not to belittle the amount of money they've set aside for this, they're also expending the salaries of the other people. Their budget is much higher than the amount that they've said. It's Nicole's salary, it's Lisa's salary, it's the other people's salary. It's the money they've invested in this overall community forest planning process. So I think that $30,000 is not too much over a year or a year and a half long period.
This, I hope, wouldn't bring on another Larry Horowitz situation.
Well,
The Larry Horowitz situation, we paid thousands of dollars for the privilege of him getting information that he could have if he'd asked for it.
Right.
I don't, we
careful.
can't prevent people from doing things that aren't particularly intelligent.
Okay. Yeah.
so how about if we first determine the scope of what this RNFP would entail, and then we can determine a budget that's appropriate to it.
So what I heard
X
your motion,
dollars, if Frank, along with anyone else, wants to work out the scope of basically what this ad is going to be, then we can decide what's an appropriate budget amount.
you probably want to have the ad go out before the next meeting, though.
yeah. We could do a not to exceed number.
Well, the person's probably going to charge $50 an hour, maybe more. I don't know what Ann charged. I think Ann charged around that. Maybe she charged more. But yet the person could do this in. I don't like the idea of going very much beyond $10,000. It seems to me that we could get a ton of work done by a conscientious person for under 20,000, perhaps under 15.
When we were talking about the overall funding for the process overall, I think that the numbers we got were around $100,000 for the whole process to put in an adequate plan. And when Nicole gave us estimates back when we were talking to Nicole about it, and she said, sometimes we do things on the back of an envelope and they're really cheap, and sometimes they're long and complicated and they're much more expensive. Given that we have spent millions of dollars of the public's money in preserving this property, it would seem like we would want to make a substantial investment in assuring that the goals and objectives and mission actions accomplished. I would favor not 10,000, but more in the park of $30,000, and not to exceed, of course. You know, if we can get it for less, let's get it for less.
How about a 3-person team? That would be awesome. Anyway.
Frank, why
We
don't you
can
draw
accept
up
any
something?
proposal made, right? I mean, if it's a 3-person team, it's a 3-person team.
Ken, Ann, and Jerry. Wow.
Or somebody
Sure.
else. Yeah, I think we can pre-select those people for sure. We would want to encourage all of them to apply if they were interested and had the time.
Can we encourage Frank to write up this help wanted, this RFD or whatever it's called? Can we encourage? Frank, do you have time to write it up? I don't have the wit
I
to
will
write
make
it
the
up.
time to do it, John.
Okay, why don't you write it up within the next week and run it by us? Do we have to have a vote on that, Bob?
You're muted, Bob.
Sorry. Yes, you can't really vote on something by email. You need to do it at the meeting. So I think that you probably have where you can draw something up and send it out. If it's broad enough, you've got a lot. I mean, you've got a lot of latitude with a request for proposal. If you make it broad enough, you can evaluate the proposals. I think the people who you'll be interested in will already know what you're looking at and will have an idea of what to say. So I don't think you want to be super specific. I do like the idea of development of a plan focused on conservation, preservation, and restoration, which is what we've been talking about. I do have to, I'll just say this based on my experience. I think that 10,000 is probably not enough to get people interested in this task. I think it might be because it's such a special place and someone would do it just because they cared enough about it. But I would encourage you to go with the $30,000 number if you're going to do this, just to make sure you get some good proposals.
So John has made a motion. Robin, could you read that motion? I saw you quickly writing it down.
Yeah, I hope I got all of it.
I'm curious to see what you have.
I wrote, move to proceed with an RFP for hiring a consultant to develop a protection, conservation, and restoration master plan. I might have missed a few words in there. Master plan with a budget not to exceed, I just added $30,000.
It's really a plan or design that would contribute to the master plan.
Plan or design to contribute to
Yes,
master
it really
plan.
would be a conservation, a protection, conservation, restoration plan or a design that would contribute to the Chuckanut Community Forest Master Plan.
Okay, I'll just type it up and put it in the chat.
Okay.
And it'll just take me a
While she's
second.
doing that, I would echo Bob's comment. This predates my time on this commission, but I did talk with Ann Eisinger back then, and I know she was really frustrated that the scope of her baseline work did not allow her much time on site. And she really would have valued being able to spend more time in the place to develop the baseline from field work. And the plan we're talking about would really benefit from someone having time to be there to see what the conditions are.
Okay.
Cool.
Does anybody, by the way, we talked about naming and we will be talking about it more. Someone has come up with the notion of Chuckanut Community Forest for a name, and someone has come up with the idea of Fairhaven Forest. A friend of mine, we were walking in there the other day, and he said, why don't we just call it the 100-acre Woods? And I thought, gee, what a great idea. Would you not like that? I mean, seriously, is that a little bit dinky? Is that a little bit too childish? Would you all prefer not to have it called that?
I don't think we get to have a say in that, Bob, honestly. I mean, excuse me, John, honestly, I think that's something the city has reserved to themselves and their process.
They said they did not do that, Frank. They said that
No.
would become part of a public process.
Well, no, that's
Yeah,
what I mean.
I think-
They will manage that process and make that determination. We can want anything we want.
Okay.
But we want it.
We can give our personal opinions.
We
That's
can
what
even
I
pass
want.
a
I want
resolution
yours.
about what we want, but it's still just our collective opinions.
And I would suggest that we would combine forces and veto a suggestion of Fairhaven Highlands as a name.
I think lightning would strike that, John. I'm confident. So if you turn on your chat over on the right-hand side, you can see what the proposed motion is. So
Or
John
click on the
McLaughlin,
chat button at the bottom of your screen.
yeah, I'll read it.
Move
John
to
McLaughlin,
proceed.
Move to proceed with RFP for hiring a consultant to develop a protection, conservation, and restoration design that would contribute to the master planning process, but for a budget not to exceed $30,000. Do I hear a second?
I second.
I'll second.
We got seconds from all three of our other commissioners, so I'll take that as a good sign. All those in favor? Raise your hand. There we go.
Aye.
Unanimous decision. Great.
Good for
That's
you,
good.
Frank.
We actually need to keep moving. The amending the conservation easement. Bob, do you want to maybe explain to all of us and also to our guests where we're at with the amendment of the conservation easement?
Well, we really haven't done anything that I'm aware of. I thought that was going to be something that was discussed at the steering committee at the last meeting. That was my understanding. So I was actually waiting to hear a report from you or John Brown about what was discussed on that topic. That's really where we need to be talking about it, or directly with the city parks director, and maybe mayor and council, the decision. I haven't done anything on it other than did go over, as you saw again in the minutes, the section of the conservation easement with permitted uses that we looked at, and the board made a vote on at the last meeting to support limiting the permitted uses in a way that was much different from the way the conservation easement reads right now. So
So that
that's,
agreement, Bob, then would be a modification of that agreement. Who would be the signatories of that agreement should it be modified? Who is it that actually decides on it? Is that the mayor, the parks?
it would have to be approved by the city council, signed by the mayor, approved by the board, the Chuckanut Community Forest Park District Board, and signed by the chair of the board.
And last time, the significant role of the parks director, was that just a process issue that led up to turning it over to the mayor and the council?
Well, when dealing with a park related issue, the Parks Department typically handles it. But when it comes to actually signing a legal agreement, the Parks Director doesn't have authority to bind the city. That has to go through their process for signing agreements, which is authorized by the council, signed by the mayor. Now, the Parks Director signs the agreement, but he's not the one with the binding signature. The process last time was going through the Parks Department first. And I still think we need to go through the Parks Department. That's not to say we couldn't also talk to the mayor and council members. Last time we had a mayor who was not as interested in the preservation issues as I think the current mayor is. So I think there's an opportunity there that didn't exist several years ago, and probably something that we should be doing.
So the procedural steps then would be for us to take our what we passed at our last meeting and take that forward to the Parks Director for a discussion, perhaps in parallel with talking with the mayor and the council about it to gauge their interest in it. And then if the Parks Director seems supportive, to then ask, do we take it to the mayor and the council, or does the Parks Director?
Well, see, the city has their process for agreements, just like we would have our process for agreements. And the last time the process was the two of us, and we could do this again if you wanted to. The process was a joint public hearing on the conservation easement. It was the city council and the Park District Board convening a joint meeting in City Hall. And there was a public hearing on it. There was quite a bit of public testimony. And then the council and the Park District Board independently voted to approve the draft agreement that was the subject of the hearing, and authorized the respective executive authorities to sign, the mayor to sign and the chair of the Park District to sign. That's what happened last time. But of course, the agreement itself was negotiated with the Parks Director. And we had something that we both metaphorically shook hands on and said, okay, we'll both take this forward and recommend it for approval. And then the public hearing, as I described, happened. Where we are right now is, I think, really, again, I think politically we're in a different time. I think we could talk to the mayor, but we do need to talk to the Parks Director and specifically go through the changes that we would like to see made. And I think the board was pretty clear last time in the motion it voted on as to, in fact, I'll read it. I've got it here in the minutes. The motion approved was to better achieve the purpose of the Park District and the perpetual preservation of the Chuckanut Community Forest, revise section 4.1, subsections A through S of the conservation easement to allow only trails, including bridges and boardwalks, signage, benches, and plaques. And then we also said to encourage review of the existing land trust easement on adjacent property to give the two easements consistency. So I think a next step would be to present this language to the Parks Director and say, this is what the board voted on. This is the policy of the Park District Board. And we would like to, as part of this process, at the end of the master planning process, come out with an amended conservation easement that includes these new allowed uses and nothing else.
So Bob, the good news is that almost all those things were discussed at the last meeting of the steering committee.
Okay, great.
Virtually all those things were agreed to. I think it's John, Bob, is that John Brown? Is that correct? I think almost
That is absolutely correct. We've already gone over this.
Oh, terrific.
I think
Nicole and Frank and Lane and the other people there, we just struck these things off one by one by one by one. We couldn't do it fast enough. And
Okay.
we came up with the same conclusions you did. And that brings the question to me, Bob, the permitted uses, this is written into the conservation easement, but the permitted uses, the grantor has the right to do or to permit the following. Clarify something for me, Council. We don't have to change any of this language. We don't have to amend the conservation easement. If we arrive, I mean, it can stand as it stands. Is this possibly right? It can stand as it stands. Then, with the agreement of the Parks Department, we cross these things out. We develop a master plan, and then eventually we transfer the easement as it stands under the along with the master plan over to a land trust. In other words, why do we have to amend this at all? The city has approved taking these things out, and the fact that they're out will become part of the master plan.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for explaining what happened at that steering committee meeting. I didn't know any of that, and I'm really glad to know that you did all that. That's terrific. That's really good progress. The master plan is a city planning document. The conservation easement is a legal instrument that runs with the land and is separately enforceable, entirely separate from the master plan in that sense. So when the conservation easement was recorded, that became a burden on the land, but it also allowed for some entitlements. And if we leave that in place and simply pass it on to the land trust, then they will have the Parks Department, a future Parks Department, maybe not the current one, would have the potential interest and certainly the ability to include the things that were in 4.1 that the board wanted to have removed.
Okay, so we do have to amend the conservation easement.
I would actually argue amending the conservation easement is arguably more important than the master plan, believe it or not, because
And
that
moreover,
document
the
is,
land trust made it very clear that with those amendments, we would have to put up more money for the defense of this
Yeah.
easement than if we modified it. So I think it's in our interest in several ways to move this forward as a formal change in that underlying document that actually is a modification of the title of the property, if I understand correctly. Is that right, Bob?
yeah, yes, it does. It would go on title to the property. So if you ever got a title report, that conservation easement shows up and the amendment would show up as overriding it. So my question, now knowing that there's been conceptual agreement on these things, was it discussed as to the timing of when we would want to bring forward the amendment to the conservation easement?
No, it
No.
wasn't even, I think
Conceived.
that was my question this time, was what's the process we engage in now? So it sounds like the next step is really to have a more formal meeting with the mayor. I think, I haven't seen the minutes of our meeting. They weren't sent out. Have you seen them, John?
I have not.
Yeah, but I think what I would like to do is then begin to have those discussions with the mayor and the council, or whoever you think is appropriate,
Yeah.
to begin to move this in a more formal direction.
Yeah, so I think the next step then, again, knowing that you had that conceptual agreement at the last meeting now, would be to prepare an amendment of the conservation easement. And I could actually, then you'd have an actual document that you could look at and talk about with the mayor, with the parks director, with any council member you
You're
want.
gonna have to sit down and renegotiate this whole darn thing with Alan Mariner. You and he are gonna have to pencil it out.
Well, yes, we are going to, but negotiate, I mean, it sounds like the negotiation's done.
Yeah.
If everybody was in agreement with what we wanted, then I'm just going to draft it up with the revised section 4.1. And that would be the new document. It would replace it.
There were a couple things that didn't get clarified, and let me just specify those. Several people on the committee have dogs and actually were advocating, to my not just dismay but astonishment, off-leash dogs in this parcel.
Yep.
To me,
Yeah.
that's the one thing that there wasn't clarity or finality about.
Nicole said we would work on that.
And I think Nicole
Well-
is open to that, but Nicole was one of the people that was sort of advocating for it. So I think that there is a rough spot or two. I think on reflection, anybody that thinks about this deeply at all, dogs off leash don't make sense in this space, in my view.
No, they
I think
don't.
we would eventually come to that conclusion. I think Nicole had a vision of taking it through somewhat of a more public process as well. But that's certainly what the committee decided. I would favor us going ahead and simply writing up as we have proposed it, and knowing that is largely, if not substantially, not completely agreed to by the parks director, and take it to her and have a more private discussion about the dog issue, but then moving it forward to the mayor and the council. But I would favor you drafting that for us at this point.
The dog issue has always been a bit of a third rail. It always sparks controversy. And is my recollection, the conservation easement currently does not mention it. And so the policy reverts to the city's blanket policy regarding its public lands, which prohibits off-leash areas except for places explicitly authorized. So if we don't touch it, then I think we're safer, and we're less likely to restricted discussion from the things, Billy.
Robin has something to say.
I
John,
just had two things. One, do we want to involve the Whatcom Land Trust in all this process? And the second was it has listed off-leash dog trails in the A through S. So by taking that out, you would be changing what could potentially be the policy.
we'd be making consistent with city policy already.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that agreement was I don't know, it's a disappointing agreement when you actually read the details. It's pretty amazing how we got kind of negotiated into a corner.
Well, you had to be there. You
Yeah,
had,
no, I totally understand.
I will say till my dying breath that the biggest accomplishment was that conservation easement.
Yeah, no, it is the biggest accomplishment.
The
but
fact that we got one has saved the district.
Yep, I think you're absolutely right about that. No, not belittling things at all. I mean, but let's move forward with the document that you draft, Bob, and reflects our last motion.
I will do that.
Great, and I'll take it to the mayor and to the council, and we'll move forward in that fashion if that's acceptable to the commissioners.
And I might suggest that the first stop should be Nicole Oliver's office, so it doesn't appear like we're going over her
For
head
sure.
right away.
Yeah.
I mean, she should be the first one to get it, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's get out of here. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
Determining if the next meeting will be online or in person, I think I would say that it's only going to be online.
Yeah,
Agreed.
online. Yeah,
We'll move along then. New business, monthly expenses, cash flow sheets, petty cash, WECU balance, $2,789. Treasurer's report. Would our treasurer like to make a report? Robin, you're muted.
Robin, you're muted.
Asking you to unmute, Robin.
Okay, we have the unencumbered cash and the encumbered cash.
You're still
And
muted, Robin. Okay, go ahead, John.
And we paid out $2,577 operating, $45,000 was paid in our loan, and the outstanding part of the loan, Hugh, John Hymas, John, the current outstanding debt is $311,823. The annual report to the Secretary of State was filed on the 26th of July. Frank, back to you.
Got it. We can accept that report, I think. And then the district payroll input form, wages for Robin Albro for 29 hours and 3/4 of an hour.
I make a motion to approve that.
second,
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Let's see, consent agenda, motion to approve following statements. Payment on June 15th of an invoice 9598 to Carmichael and Clark, $1,730 for regular professional services. Payment on June 24th of invoice $32,700 to the Whatcom County Administrative Services for second quarter payroll. How much was that for, Robin? Do you know?
30.
Did I not put the amount in there?
No.
Oh, I am sorry. It was $30.
Yeah, $30. There we go.
I'll make a motion that we approve those payments.
John Brown.
Second.
Hugh seconds. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth and the whole truth. And nothing.
Absolutely.
Robin will send an email to the 3 board members. She always sends them to right after the meeting. Frank, John, and Hugh, John Brown. Please respond by confirming by email that you approve this payment.
We'll see you on Friday morning, Frank.
Any other issues? I'd like to call the meeting to adjournment. Our next meeting
Oh, wait.
Wednesday, August 25th at 6 p.m.
Hugh, you're muted.
You're muted.
If John or Frank cannot make the Friday meeting, please let me know and I would like to sit in then.
Great.
Zoom.
I think we're both planning on being there for now.
So
Right.
Frank, early in the meeting, you mentioned a city council meeting. Could you remind us which date that was?
Yeah,
That was
August 30th.
30th.
I'll
really?
send out a link.
Okay.
August 30th,
Great.
that's, and the reason we mentioned it is that's when the presentation of the city's new urban forest plan will be presented
Great.
to the council,
Okay.
Oh, cool.
August 30th.
Huh.
And the report we will hopefully get from Annalise sometime. Other business? Adjourned.
Right.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Frank, I'll send you this copy of this thing that about the RFP. Do
Great,
you want a
perfect.
copy of it? Yeah,
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
I'll
Yeah.
do that after the meeting.
Super, thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thanks, Robin.
Thanks, John.
Enjoy.
Okay. You too.